Welcome to Raise Your Vibe and Heal. My name is Lisa Snyder, and I'm an intuitive healer and breathwork coach here to help you live your best life. On this channel and podcast, we hold channeled spiritual messages, mini healing sessions, and welcome monthly guests to share their wisdom. To stay updated on the latest events, please subscribe to my event newsletter on my website, lisahsnyder.com, which is linked in the description field of this broadcast. As a welcome gift, you will have access to a short breathwork video to balance your system anywhere, anytime. Plus, you'll receive a weekly pick a card message for the week delivered to your inbox on Sunday mornings. I am so honored to welcome our guest tonight. Paige Lee is a grief educator, intuitive healer, and author of the book Choose to Believe, a story of miracles, healing, and the afterlife. She volunteers as an affiliate leader for Helping Parents Heal and is also a caring listener for the organization. In 2022, she co-founded Transcending Grief with medium Kat Bailey. Her spiritual awakening came abruptly and forcefully after her 23-year-old son, Bryan, was murdered in September 2008. Just as the only world she'd ever known was shattered, a new world opened, a world filled with hope, spirit, and love, a world that allowed her not only to continue having a relationship with her son, but a world that opened her own true self into being. Paige believes when we let go of our paradigms that hold us prisoner and limit our ability to thrive, we learn to live a life full of peace, abundance, and joyful purpose. Paige is dedicated to her mission of helping people transcend their grief and offers a variety of services, including private coaching, online workshops, and in-person retreats. To learn more, please visit her website at paigewlee.com. Links to her book, which is available on Amazon, and her website are in the description field of this broadcast. And I've also pinned a link to the Amazon in the comment section where you can go directly to purchase her book there. And also, we are going to be having a giveaway tonight. So one lucky person is going to be winning Paige's book. I will be shipping that to you personally. And so we will be doing that drawing near the end of tonight's event. You do need to be present to win. To enter the drawing for that, please type 11 into the chat box. So that's 11 into the chat box. I would like to welcome Paige Lee to our live tonight. Hello.
Hi,
Paige. I am so honored that you are here tonight. And I just thank you so much for joining us. I just read your book twice. I read it twice. It was such an easy read. And as a mom myself of a current a 23-year-old, I'll say your age, Laura. And thank you, Laura, for being in the background and helping us out tonight. Your book touched me on so many levels. And you detailed your pain and your journey with how he transitioned in September 28 at great length in the book. So what I would like to do is really focus on the life of Bryan tonight, if that's okay with you, and really talk about the journey that you've been on since then. It is quite the journey, and I just want to thank you for joining us live tonight. I appreciate that.
I thank you so much, Lisa. I really am just like so thrilled that you invited me, and thank you to all of your listeners. It's nice to see you guys. So I'm here to answer whatever questions you have. I love nothing more than talking about my son. So this will be so easy. This will be easy.
Well, I'm going to just say a shout out I'm going to say hello to people that have joined us. So I'd like to say hello to Keith and Isabel, Laura, B, Luann. Let's see. I would like to say hello to Carla. Hello, Carla. Let's see. I think I said B, Luann. Boy, there's so many comments already in the comments. Sandra's also joined us. So if I didn't have a chance to say hello, please accept my apologies. And also, please feel free to say hello in the chat box. And if you have any questions during the course of this session tonight, Laura will be keeping an eye on that and will be prompting us with that. So, and Carla says hello. And then on the right side, I don't know if I mentioned this to you, Paige, but on the right side, there's a comment box. You're able to look at the comments as well. All right. The reason we are here, what brought us together initially, is this wonderful book by Camille Dan. Gathering at the doorway. And yay, Paige has her copy. Let's just hold that for a second because I know Camille, she'll want to do a screenshot of that. All right, great, thank you. This book by Camille Dan, I've met so many wonderful guests as a result of this book. There's just so many chapters by wonderful people sharing their story of their journey with kids on the other side. There's mediums, there's healers, and I'm also very honored to have a chapter in there, chapter 33, by the way. I love that, the threes. But it is just a wonderful book. All proceeds go to help support wonderful, worthwhile organizations. Nobody makes a dime off of that book. So please consider checking out that book by Camille Dan, Gathering at the Doorway. It's been out for about a year now, and it's just because of her selfless work so many of us have met in this community, and that is how Paige and I got connected. So, all right.
Sure.
So Paige, can we talk a little bit? I'd like to focus on the life of Bryan. So if you could first just introduce us to Bryan, please. We do have some pictures that I want to thank you for sharing with us. I would just love to add so the listeners can have a chance to meet Bryan.
Thank you so much. Oh my gosh, Lisa, I love these pictures. This is my son, Bryan Richard Frost. Frost was, I was married to his father at the time that he was born. We're not married now, but he was probably 2 or 3 in the cowboy hat picture, and then maybe 9 or so in the other picture. And he was my only living child, I always say. I had lost 3 babies pre-birth prior to, well, 1 pre-birth after him, or anyhow, I have 4 babies in spirit now, my 3 pre-birth babies. And then of course, Bryan, who I say was my only living child. And he was amazing. He was really smart. He was a straight A student. He was a lacrosse player, a football player. He excelled at, basketball, all of the things that he did through school. I mean, he really did. I know we're all proud of our kids, but this kid, if he set his mind to do something, he did it very well. There's him at his lacrosse at the end of a game. The picture on the right with black and white was during his time at USC. Some of his friends at USC sent me that picture. But when he graduated high school, which is the middle picture, that's his high school graduation photo, he decided he wanted to go to an Ivy League school, and he couldn't. He tried to get accepted. He got waitlisted at Duke, so he decided to apply for a military academy appointment. He received, I think, 5 or 6 military academy appointments, from the people that be. And he chose West Point. So he went there for a year and a half. He played on the secondary football team there, but he didn't like it. Bryan was not he wasn't a rule follower, I'm going to say. And so he really it wasn't his cup of tea, which I could have told him, but moms and kids. And so he left and he went to Boulder for a semester, and then he applied for USC and he got in. He finished his he finished his 1 degree there. Sorry, I'm having a moment. And then he pursued a 2nd degree in film, which is, unfortunately, he was 6 months away from completing that degree when he was murdered. So just one of those things, wrong place, wrong time, just off the campus of USC. And that was almost 15 years ago. So it was a long time ago. He was 23 when he passed. Bryan was funny. He was smart, but I always like to say none of his friends knew he was Dean's List, right? He was always Dean's List, but none of his friends knew that because he didn't brag about it. You would never have known. He loved to party with the best of them. He's his mother's child. He loved to party. He loved Led Zeppelin. That's our favorite band. But he's just smart and very studious, and he excelled at everything he did. And he drove himself very hard. And, for a 23-year-old, he was so accomplished, and he had traveled the world. The year before or the summer that he passed, he had traveled to Pakistan to film a movie there with his friend who's from Karachi. And that's another whole story in itself that we tell in the book. But just amazing, right? That he was so well traveled and so learned in his short 23 years, two college degrees, all of that. So he is my pride and joy. He was my reason for living then. He's really the purpose that keeps me driving forward today. I'm happily married to my husband of 25 years. He has children and grandchildren through him, all of whom I adore. But this is my boy, right? This is my boy. And I miss him terribly. But we have this really amazing relationship, and he's my partner in the work that I do. So, I miss him, but yet he's so present and active in my life. It almost seems strange to say I miss him because I talk to him every day. Yeah.
You know, it's interesting. In the book you had written, you had made a comment that he had said that he didn't believe. Well, you learned that he didn't feel he was going to live a very long life. Did you know that while he was here, or is that something that you learned after he was on the other side?
So I think that he knew that only because he was so driven to do so much in such a short time. That's why I think that he, on some level, knew. We almost lost him two other times. There's a very uh, nerve-wracking story in the book about how he fell into a class
Yes,
5 whitewater rapid one time, and I jumped in to save him. It's absolutely a miracle. The hand of God reached in and pulled us out of that river. There's no reason that we survived
literally.
that. I mean, literally. I don't even. I was there, shivering, holding on to him with one hand. I was fully dressed. He had a life jacket on. I don't think I did, and it was freezing, the Lochsaw River in North Idaho. And anyhow, we survived that. I almost lost him one other time. And I say that about my knowing because I was always afraid something would happen to him. I didn't know it. I didn't have a premonition. Actually, I did the night before, but all of his life, I worried that something would happen to him. And when he moved to LA, we're from Idaho, Boise at the time, very small town. 15 years ago, not so much anymore. And I was like, oh man, Bryan, you really want to go to LA? Are you sure? Like, be safe. And, I made him get the map of books. We didn't have, phone GPS then. I had this big book of maps so he could find his way around and not get lost on all the freeways. But the night before he died, he called me like he often did. And we were just chatting, but I was sick. And I remember saying, I'm not feeling so good. Maybe I'll just call you tomorrow. But we didn't get off the phone and we kept talking. And he's like, I'm going to go out. And I'm like, Bryan, it's 9 o'clock there, 8, 9 o'clock. Why would you go out this late? Don't go. And I begged him,
Mhm.
don't go, don't go. And of course he did find somebody to go with him and he did go. And that was the night that he passed. So, anyhow, so maybe a little bit of premonition there. But I think mostly because he was so adventurous and pushed himself so hard and so accomplished in such a short amount of time, I think is primarily why I say that. Yeah.
Mm. You know what?
Yeah.
You mentioned something in the. I read your book twice. I just
I know. You're so sweet.
here. Well, no, it's not being sweet. It's you being an amazing communicator and author, and the
Oh,
way that you channel messages in the book and the way it just flowed is absolutely beautiful. And
mhm.
here's the thing. I do not have a child on the other side. I have so much passion and compassion and empathy for those who do. I can only imagine what that must feel like. What that must feel like, and I just, the way you wrote, it is the way you just talk about the grief process and the journey with the grief process. It literally could apply to anything. It doesn't have to necessarily be, I know that you focused on, of course,
Right.
your personal journey, but I could relate to some of the things that you were writing in that book. And I just really, really resonated with it. So I love that. One of the things you had mentioned, I wanted to bring this up because in these broadcasts, we often talk about you have no idea what you can do to shine the light in the world. It could be something
Mm.
as simple as a smile. It could be something as simple as saying hello or opening the door. You had mentioned an experience in your book that really got my attention, and I think you know the one I'm talking about. If you could just briefly talk
Yes.
about that, that was so touching. I love that.
Yeah, twofold actually. So, when we first found when we went to LA right away, obviously. We went to LA
Mhm.
right away, and when we finally made our way around to going to the hospital where I thought he had passed at the hospital. I found out later that he'd passed in the ambulance, but we made our way there to try to find the doctors. We wanted to talk to the people that cared for him when he came into the ER. We wanted to see the medical records, all of that, and we came in and I had a panic attack right off the bat in the hallway. We came in, I want to think it was a back door. I don't remember that clearly. And there was this man, large man who he was like an angel, a black man, big, beautiful, soft, loving in his face. And he was, I think, an orderly or a security man. And he took one look at me and he just came to me and just not literally, but wrapped me energetically in his arms and in his love. And he took care of us for the rest of the time we were there. But what's really interesting is when we went back a year later for the trial, and do you want me to lead into that story, Lisa?
Yes.
When we went into the trial, and I had the stress leading up to the trial was so bad and so intense, and I was so nervous. And, because it's interesting at a trial, they try to make the victim out to be the aggressor, right? And so especially with Bryan having had football background and, West Point training. So I was really nervous about all of that and how that would go. So my stress resulted in bronchitis. I was a smoker at the time, so I had, used to having bronchitis anyway. And, but it was pretty severe, and it was so severe that my sister-in-law rushed me to the hospital. And I didn't know until we walked in the door that it was the same hospital, and it was the same man who met us there. And he took one look at me, and he turned around to the other people, and he said, USC. Because it was all over the news. It was live, right? Live trial. And he knew exactly who I was. He probably remembered, I'm sure, our interaction from before. And he took care of me again. And I'll never forget him and his kindness. And what you said is true. It's nothing to us to be nice to somebody. It takes nothing away from us to give somebody a kind word, to say, you look beautiful today, or whatever it is. And for him to open up his heart to me the way he did twice, not once, but twice, huge impact for me and my family, and allowed me to get, the care that I needed so that I could go back to the courtroom the next day. So. Yeah.
Yes. Oh,
you know what else cool happened in that hospital? I have to tell you real quick.
Oh, yes, of course.
Actually, I did spend the night, and that night I had a dream that the roles were reversed. So his family, the guy's family, was also, of course, in the courtroom, and I had a dream that the roles were reversed, and it was Bryan that had killed him, Mr. Ford, and I had a dream that his mother was in my shoes and that I was in her shoes. And I saw so clearly in the room the reversal of the roles that we played, in her defense of her son, of course, and my anguish and pain and grief over my son. And I didn't know till later, like months, maybe even years later, but I could look back on that and say, thank you, Spirit, for showing me that, because that gave me the compassion that I needed to extend toward her and toward him, quite honestly, but we probably don't want to get into that. But you know what I mean? Because it was like I could see her pain had it been her son, and I had compassion for her. So it made me nicer to her, I think, in the courtroom, if that makes sense. It made me not afraid to smile at her and not afraid to let her know that we didn't blame, her or her family or whatever. So I thought that was interesting.
You didn't write about that did you? I don't remember reading that. I was going to say, I don't remember that story. And I read the book twice, and I have all these notes from, just because I just didn't, oh my gosh. Okay. So we have another picture that we haven't gotten to yet that we're going to put on the screen. Laura, if you can put that last picture on there, could you please talk about this picture? And then we're going to zoom in on it in the next slide. So if you could please, when was this picture taken? And could you please talk about this? This picture is like
something I don't know. Oh, this is going to be fun. Okay, I'm going to have to put my glasses on for this. So this picture was taken, I believe, at Bogus Basin. So Bryan was an excellent snowboarder. He started skiing when he was 3. His dad was on the ski patrol up at Bogus Basin, which is our hill just 45 minutes from home. And he, massive snowboarder, or snowboarder, and he loved it. And this was taken, I think, at the top of Bogus Basin. Now, it might have been Bend, Oregon, but I'm pretty sure this was Bogus. And it wasn't until after he passed that we found this picture. Somebody, I think, gave it to me. I'm sorry, I don't remember all the details. 15 years is a long time ago. And so, and I found it, and I'm like, what? Are you kidding me? Like, if that's not, like, look at that. It's shining right on his heart.
And now let's zoom in. Zoom in a little closer, Laura. Can you bring? There we go. Look.
Are you looking at the
all of it?
What are you looking at?
All of it. All of it. All of it. It is. Some might say
orb.
Yes. This when I looked at this picture, I'm like, are you kidding me right now? So much light.
Crazy.
And the thing is, you know, the name of your book, the title of your book, excuse me, is Choose to Believe, a Story of Miracles, Healing, and the Afterlife. And who better to write that book with than your beautiful son, Bryan? I just look at this picture, everybody.
Absolutely.
Yep. B says this picture is super cool. Janelle says, wow, that is amazing. Keith also says, love the angel in the picture. That's what I see too, Keith. I see an angel in that picture as well. Yes, it's absolutely beautiful. So thank you for sharing these pictures with us, because it's just
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Orb and then Karen's also an intuitive, and she sees orb and angel wings. Yes, I see that as well. It's like we've got
and
a zero.
Was taken, Lisa, this was years before he passed. So
doesn't
how
matter.
Interesting is that? It's really well. I'm saying it's almost like a premonition, isn't it?
Yes.
That we can look back on later and have like a wow. Yeah.
Yes. And the fact that you're welcome. And the fact, and then Marsha says wrapped in angel love, and Carla says, yes, an angel. Keith says he has chills, and Janelle says almost like angel wings around him. Yes. And I think it's interesting that somebody gave the picture to you, did you say? Or did you find the picture? Somebody happened to give.
Not sure.
Okay, doesn't matter, but it came into your life after he had passed. So love this picture. I love, love, love this. So thank you so much for sharing that. Alrighty, let's get talking about Bryan some more. So signs that you have received from him. There was one that you talked about, the garage. Well, before we get to that, you sent me a text right before the start of this. I want you to talk about this, because I had no idea. I literally had no idea until I saw it posted. I saw something that you had posted on your Transcending Grief Facebook page, I think, or your page. I can't remember which page it was, but can you just share that really quick, please?
Yeah. So, in the grief community, of which I'm very, very ingrained, right, in the grief community, have been since Bryan's passing in one way or another. And there's a thing called International Bereaved Mother's Day. International Bereaved Mother's Day, which I hate. I hate it because I'm a mom. I was a mom. I'm still a mom. And I will celebrate my relationship with my son next Sunday, just like you. But there is a thing called that. And I was searching this morning for what do I need to honor that somehow. I need to talk about it because so many people in my sphere are grieving and early in their grief. And so I was searching for the right words. And then I actually ran across that photo. Is a woman by the name of Sally Stacy who put that on her. So I always give credit where it's due. But I shared it with the message. And basically, the renaming of that is Child in Spirit Mother's Day, International Child in Spirit Mother's Day, because even though, we're still mothers, but our children are in spirit. But I would take it a step further and say, we don't need a special day. We're special. I think I don't like the word bereaved, but I think parents who have children in spirit are very special people. And I think the kids are very special people, but I don't think we need a special day. I don't like that being separate, and having this light shown on us, but that's just my own opinion. However you celebrate that today, for those of you who are grieving the passing of your child, know that they're not lost. Know that you are still a mom. Know that you're still a dad. You are still going to have Mother's Day. You're still going to have Father's Day. But the fact that day was today, Lisa, I couldn't believe it. I was like, are you even aware that today's this International Bereaved Parent Day? And you have me on your show. So I thought that was synchronicity.
The thing is, we originally scheduled this for last month, and then my schedule with travel and everything, it was just getting too tight. So we rescheduled it, and you said today would work. And I was like, great. And then you texted me and said, did you know? I said, I had no idea. Yeah. You cannot make this up. Seriously.
Make it up. No.
Karen says they are your celestial children. Like that a lot. Karen, that is really well said. Okay, that was leading me to another point here. You were talking about we're going to talk about signs from Bryan. Can you just share some of the signs you received from Bryan? I love this.
How many do you want me to tell?
Well, I want you to talk about the one in the garage. Yes, and the very first time, he got your attention. That one I think is important.
Okay. They're my favorites. Okay, so the first sign
I
that
know
I'm
that
aware.
because I know that because I'm psychic, girl.
Yeah, I know you, I know. And
So
by
are
the way,
you.
those cards you pull are amazing.
Thank you.
So it was Bryan passed in September of 2008. And so it was summer of 2009. It was pre-trial, before the trial. And I love flower gardens. I don't grow vegetables, but I have flower gardens all over my, property. We live on 5 acres. And I was out working in the garden and I was, just weeding, and I felt a presence. Now, I had been taking psychic development classes prior to this, but I had not, to my knowledge, had that aha sign from Bryan prior to this day. It happened to be the day that we were celebrating my 50th birthday with my stepkids. They were coming over for dinner. We were barbecuing. But that afternoon, I'm out working in my yard and I feel a presence. And I literally stopped and I looked around and I'm like, is the neighbor girl out? And I'm like, Molly, are you here? No. Laura, are you out? These are my neighbors. And we don't have any other neighbors, right? Everybody's pretty far out. So there's nobody around. So I said, Mom, is that you? Because my mom passed away in 2012.
Okay.
And I'm like, Mom, is that you? And no response. And then I said, Bryan, is that you? No response. So I said, well, Bryan, if that's you, send me a ladybug. Like, off the top of my head. No
Yep.
special relationship with ladybugs ever in my whole life. Never had seen one in my home. And then that night, we're preparing for dinner, and in our dining room, we have a bay window area. And I was walking by and I glanced at the bay window, and there on the windowsill is a ladybug. You guys,
Oh my God.
I screamed out loud. I did. I screamed out loud.
Yep.
I'm jumping up and down, and I'm like, Bryan. And honestly, the kids and my husband think I've lost it. They're like, call the psych ward. She's lost it. But it was the first. I mean, you guys, you can't make that up,
No,
right,
you
Lisa?
can't.
You
You
cannot
can't
make that
up.
up, just like you can't make the other things up that we've talked about. So that was crazy. And so that started, which is why you put the ladybug on the beautiful advertisement that you made for tonight.
Yes.
I have ladybugs everywhere. And that started the flurry of ladybug signs from Bryan. He still sends them to this day, not as often. He sends them to his stepbrother, Stephen, and they'll get a ladybug and it will stay with them for weeks. The same ladybug.
Wow.
That's crazy. I know. I'm telling you. Usually to me, I see them and people will say, is every ladybug from Bryan? And I'm like, no, of course not. But I know the difference, because when I get the ladybugs like that day and I'm instantly awash, right, with that, oh my gosh, it's Bryan. Bryan's not the ladybug. I don't believe he's manifesting as the ladybug, but I believe he sends them. It's a wave, right? It's that, like, I think the angels send the synchronicity and the numbers, right? 11, 11, 12, 22, 22, those numbers, which I had a 22, 22 today. Anyhow, so that was one, but they get better. So one year, it was the first Mother's Day. Actually, it was previous, wasn't it? It was the first sign. I had forgotten the timing of this. I'm so sorry. So this one preceded the ladybug. This one preceded the ladybug. It was Mother's Day, my first Mother's Day without Bryan. And I was a mess. I had gotten up that morning and I just turned on the TV like anything to stop my thoughts. And I tried to meditate. So I'm like, well, I'm going to try to meditate. So I paused the TV, just paused it. It's still up, but it's paused. Nothing's moving. And I meditate, because new practice of mine, I had been learning how to meditate. And I start meditating. And all I could see after a few moments, I just kept seeing little hearts floating around in my consciousness. Little hearts, just floating around in my consciousness. And finally, I was like, well, finally I gave up. I'm like, well, I'm not getting anything. And so I got up and I looked at the TV, and there it says, first, before that, I had this thought, probably also my first intuitive thought, that I always say it's like kerplunk in my head. It's like, boom,
yes.
There's this message.
Yes.
And it said, I see, now I'm going to forget my own story. I think it said go out into the garage, right? Go
Yes.
out into the
Yes.
garage.
That's what I
And
read.
so, okay. And I'm like, go out into the garage. That's weird. So then I looked up at the TV and I'm like, I'm not going to go out in the garage. That's silly. I'm not going to go out in the garage. And I look up at the TV and on the screen where it had been paused the whole time, it said, hurry, offer ends soon. Hurry, offer ends soon. So I go out into the garage. And do you remember what happened next?
Yes, I do. But why don't you go ahead and share?
No, to go ahead and tell it. Tell
No,
that part
no.
of
This
it,
is
and
your
then
story. I just know. I'm just gonna say there's a Bible and there's something in the Bible, and that's all I want to talk about. I want you to share that part. That is just.
we went out into the garage, and I came back. I went out to the garage, and I couldn't find anything in the garage. I can't remember what was in the garage, but I come back in, and they were like, read God's word. I had that thought again, like read God's word. So I'm sorry, I know I missed something there, but read God's word. So I went to my bedroom and I have a red Bible that I've had since I was a child. It says Paige Whitfield on it that my grandparents had given me. And I picked up this Bible and I opened it up and I'm like, I'm going to read right here. And I opened it up and I read that passage and I'm like, well, that means nothing to me.
No.
I mean, the Bible's great. And all that, but I'm
great,
like, I don't resonate with that at all.
No.
And so I'm going to try it again. So I close my eyes and I'm like, where should I stop the page?
I've done that. I've done that.
I know. I picked another page and I'm like, I'm gonna read this. And I'm like, well, it doesn't make any sense to me. So I closed it. And in the closing of the Bible, out floats these papers. I have such chills right now.
Me
Out
too.
floats these papers. And I'm like, what? And so I pick it up. You guys, it's a Mother's Day card from Bryan that he hand wrote. I can't remember the year. I want to say 1988 or 1989 or 90. And it was handmade at preschool or daycare, wherever he was, kindergarten, I think. And I opened it up. And of course, he'd written a message, but he'd written hearts all over it. He'd written little hearts literally all over the inside of the card, which is, of course, what I'd been seeing in my meditation was all of those little hearts. So
you just received you received validation that what you saw in your meditation was it, that you were not making that up, because why would you go to that Bible? Why would that, I mean, you just wouldn't have thought of that. And so you were being sent the signs.
Yeah.
Now, okay, we see you today and you're bubbly, your personality is bubbly, you're so full of joy. Of course, I'm sure that you still have your moments of, you would love for Bryan to be here on this side. I want to talk about the fact, I want to switch gears here a little bit. Thank you for sharing those signs. Love those signs. Of course, I asked you to talk about them because they just get your attention. And there's more in the book, guys. You should really check out the book, which again, that's linked at the comments section here. You can get her book on Amazon. There is a quote that you said, before I could find joy, I needed to grieve the person I was before Bryan died. And then you were talking about in the book that it was time to do the hard work, which, by the way, this applies towards any grief. You must say yes to suffering before you can heal. And then you talked about, and then you can just pick and choose what you want to talk about here. The biggest misguided belief, if we heal from our grief, we will have betrayed our loved ones. So could you please talk about the darker side of grief, burying it, not hiding it? And can you just address that, please? Because this is, I'm sure this is a big part of the kind of work that you do with your efforts.
Yeah, thank you. I was just making a couple of quick notes. So
okay.
I call it, and it's probably not a unique term to me, but I've always called it conscious healing. I think we have to be extremely cautious on our grief journey. I do call it grief healing. I've been called out on that. People say, oh, you can't, there's no such thing as grief healing, but there is. It's a choice. It's a conscious choice that we make to continue grieving, to continue living in our pain and our sadness, or to choose to, I call it reaching for the light, right? Always reaching for the light and reaching for happiness. Joy is possible, but people early in the grief journey, understandably, we can't see that early on. We don't understand that it's possible. So I feel like my job and so many people's job, and even in the work that you do, Lisa, our our role is to show people that you can still find happiness, you can still find joy. And even if you can't see it yet, just hold on to me. Hold on to me and let me lead you and let me guide you, right? Because
Yes.
I'm going to get you there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in transcending grief and helping parents heal, so much of what we do is at no cost and no charge. So it's just, there's so much available out there through those two organizations and many others that weren't available to me when my son passed, right? So I had to kind of dig the harder way. I ran across a wonderful gentleman by the name of Tom Zuba, who many of you may know, early in my grief journey, who did so much for me, by way of helping me progress on that, that heading toward the light, right? So anyhow, so I call it conscious healing. Now, grief can be very dark. And in my book, I talk about grief surges and how they come out of nowhere and they just literally suck us into this black hole. And it's like we have a blanket or shroud of grief and we wrap it around ourselves and we hide in it. And it's hard sometimes to climb out of that. It
Mm-hmm.
takes conscious effort to climb up out of that. And sometimes, like I remember one time I was in that space for a couple of months at least. And it wasn't until I was on the other side of it that I was really able to see what had been happening. So I've lived all of this, right? It's experience for me. I've lived all of it 1,000 times over. I know what you're going through. I feel your pain. I have felt that same pain. You'll read the book. You'll see how close I got to
Yes.
considering the taking of my own life, which
Mm-hmm.
honestly, if any parent with a child in spirit tells you that they haven't considered that, then they'd probably be lying to you, right?
I
It's
agree.
like, of course, it's something that we consider, that we think about. It was not my way, not my path. Spirit told me that very clearly. By then, I was really starting to hear spirit a little more loudly. Um, so there is that. It is possible to come out of the dark and into the light, but it does take work on your part. So reaching out for people to talk to, right? Allowing yourself the grace and understanding that you're grieving and that grief is selfish. You need to take care of yourself. I'm here to tell you
Mm-hmm.
that. The rest of your
Mm-hmm.
people will be fine. They're going to find their own way. You need to take care of you because you can't, especially if you're a mother, you can't care for your whole family and their grief journeys when you're hollow inside, right? We all know that. So, and sometimes fathers too. I don't mean to exclude the dads out there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's one thing. And then there's this early, when we're in our grief journey in the early years, and I thought it was only me, but I know now that we all go through this. We are afraid to move. We're afraid to move past our pain because we're afraid that that's betraying them. That if we stop grieving, if I stop crying and screaming and kicking the floor and drinking myself with my wine every night, if I stop doing all of those things and wallowing in my grief, then I have betrayed Bryan. And the truth is that the exact opposite is true. The exact opposite of that is true, right?
Yes.
When we allow ourselves to face our fears, and the hardest part of the journey is accepting that they have passed into spirit and being willing to meet them halfway. That's where the healing is. That's what I try to teach people. So that's that conscious healing. However you get there, through meditation, through psychic development classes, but this belief in the afterlife and the understanding that my life still has purpose, those are the two things that helped me heal primarily. And I couldn't have put words to it then so much,
No.
other than, I mean, from the very beginning, you guys, 3 weeks after he passed, I was lying on my bed wide awake, and I heard out loud with my ears, I heard, "Mom!" And I jumped up out of my bed. I wasn't in bed. I was lying on the bed. I jumped up and I'm like, "Bryan, where are you?" And I knew at that moment that I would find him and that I wouldn't stop searching until I did. And so that's always been my journey. And I try to help other people, not just parents, but all people grieving, to get there. Now, the not betraying them is really, time to some degree helps with that, because time does soften the grief. Time doesn't heal us, but time can soften the pain. And so when we get to that place of softening, that we're not, well, just, you'll know when you're ready, right? And that might be a
Mm-hmm.
year or 2 years or 3 years for you, because there is no timeline for grief. But Now, the other thing though is I kind of used to teach, and I implied when I said that statement about in order to heal, we have to have it's conscious suffering, right? We have to say yes to our suffering before we can. I don't, we do have to say yes to it because we have to allow it, right? And we have to feel it and we have to acknowledge it. And there's many ways that I could share with you about how we do that. But I have shifted slightly in my feelings about that because I used to feel that we had to trudge through the pain, that we had to feel every aspect, every morsel of pain. We had to feel it and relive it. And I don't believe that anymore because what I've learned, and I have a teacher locally named Jill Feeler who helped me see this, that the pain sits right beside the grief. It's not one or the other. Our pain sits right next to our grief, and we can do one while the other still exists. We don't have to go through the pain to get to connection, right? Or to get to healing. We don't have to. We can have the connection with our loved ones in spirit while we're feeling pain, while we're grieving. We just consciously choose to set it aside just for a moment, right? Just set it aside. So those are some of the things that I've learned, and just a little bit of how my thought process might have changed a little bit since the publishing of the book in 2020.
Well,
Yeah.
what I got from that, and that's great that we're always learning and growing, and that's the whole point, right? We're expanding, we're growing. But what I got from that when I read that passage was, it doesn't do us any good to bury our grief. It doesn't do any good to ignore it, sweep it under the rug, or not address it. Finding ways to, such as your work, transcending grief. You have retreats. There's different things like, it could be meditation. But it's important to find the right thing that works for you. Now, you had commented,
Exactly.
and I spoke to somebody else, and I'm not going to name this person because I don't think I have permission to say this, but you had mentioned in the book, and I just want to highlight this really quick. It's really important that if you do choose therapy, find the right therapist. You had mentioned that you had chosen once, but you want to just briefly highlight that experience really quickly about that. Because everyone says, well, just go to therapy, it'll fix you. A good therapist could be helpful, but
and
can you just...
there's a time and a place for that, right? Like
Yes.
we've been grieving the loss of our grandchildren for the last 2 years, and my stepdaughter and that whole family are just like gone, and they live 10 miles away. And I went to therapy for that. I saw my local therapist for a long time for that. But when Bryan passed, you get the invitations to all the grief support groups, and I won't name names, and then LA said, we'll send you to a therapist. We'll cover it. City of LA, we'll cover it since your child died in our city. And I'm like, I guess if they're paying for it, I should go. Right.
Right.
So I went, and this woman, I swear, all she wanted to do was just make me cry. And I remember telling my husband, I can do that by myself. I do that all day, every day anyway. I don't need to drive all the way downtown to do that and spend anybody's money, LA's or mine. So I quit going, and then it wasn't long after that I did find Helping Parents Heal and Elizabeth Boisson, and she had just started Helping Parents Heal. So I became a local in-person affiliate leader for her. And that probably helped me much more than anything else, because then I could take all of my knowledge about the afterlife that I'd been learning, all of those things, and incorporate it into that. And then I opened a healing center, and I started doing Reiki and grief support meetings and things like that. So it's been quite a journey, but therapy is if you need it, get it. If you don't need it, it's okay. It's all just unique and personal. Yeah.
Well, what you'd mentioned in that book is a therapist really wanted to focus on, I think you said you went to 3 sessions, and each session was focused on how he died. And it was just, felt like it was just re-traumatizing you over and over and over again. I spoke with another person with a child on the other side who had the same experience. And so the blanket statement of just go to therapy. Well, what does therapy mean to you? Is it a support group? Is it going to, whatever? I mean, find what works for you. That's the important message. And if it's not working for you, if you're finding you're just hashing because I know some people that are going to therapy for other issues, and it seems like all they're working on is this just rehashing the same old thing. Instead, you want to be taking steps forward. So one of the things that you also talked about is he told you, Mom, no more mediums. And could you just mention briefly about why Bryan told you that?
Because Bryan knew, it's a couple quick stories. Bryan knew that I could hear him. He knew that we had already a connection, right? But when I first learned pendulum, I'm trying really hard in 2010, learned pendulum. I'm trying really hard. I made an appointment in my calendar every day. I've got the board, I've got my pendulum, and I'm like, what do you want to say today, Bryan? Are you here? You know, and I tried. I'm not knocking the pendulum. It's an
Right.
amazing tool for many.
Right.
But for me, he kept saying, we don't need that. He's like, we don't need that, Mom. He's like, we don't need that. Like,
Come
and
on,
I kept
Mom.
hearing him say that, like, you don't need that, Mom. And also one time I'm getting frustrated. He said, just wait, just wait. I have to match my energy to the pendulum. So that was his way with me.
Whoa,
He was a
whoa,
little,
whoa. Wait. Can you just, I want you to go back just a second on that because I don't think you mentioned that in the book. Can you just mention the
no, I didn't.
match
He
your, just, can you
said,
just, because people who do work with pendulums, and if you could just repeat that little piece you said, that was important. Thank you.
he said, be patient. I need time to match my energy to the pendulum energy.
Okay. Now,
Yep.
Now, here's a, that would also apply because sometimes we have this belief system that once they're on the other side, they can just magically do everything. They have to, my understanding is that, excuse me, those in spirit are going to have to work on matching our energy where we're at. We're raising our vibe, they're matching our vibe. So whether it's a pendulum or whether it's mediumship or whatever it is, that is an important point. Yeah, I did not read that in the book, so thank you for sharing that.
I don't think it was. I probably wasn't in the book. Yeah. And then he just kept saying, we don't need that. We don't need that. And so that's when I really started to embrace my intuitive connection with him. And I had many doubts. And that's why one day Spirit finally said, just choose to believe already. Kind of like that. And I'm like, what? Choose to believe? And I wrote it down, and I always knew that would be the title of the book. And that was, 10 years ago. So I must, took me a while, but yeah. And Spirit also, at the end of every chapter in that book, there's a little synopsis of the chapter that was really all Spirit written, those little sections. And Bryan, the whole middle of the book is this poem, I guess, if you want to call it that Bryan wrote directly through me. I didn't write it. That was channeled writing from my son to you, to all of you readers out there, because it's a beautiful message of, he takes us on that journey from grief to finding each other in the light. And when I said earlier, we talk about matching the energy of the pendulum. When I said earlier, when we're willing to meet them as they are now and find them in that space, it's the same thing. It's raising our consciousness and our awareness to meet them where they are now of this vibration so that we can communicate. And I don't doubt anymore at all. I absolutely choose to believe. Too many miracles. I mean, we've only touched on a few, but so many miracles. And I know your audience, I know everybody has their own miracles to share.
Yes.
So,
well, and that's a good point too. For those of us that are developing our mediumship skills, and you're intuitive, you work with Bryan. It is a process, and it's we're sitting in our power. We're taking the time. We're out in nature. You mentioned that you communicate quite a bit with him when you're on hikes, and it's it is a process. And when we're processing grief and we're working through emotions, it is our energetic blocks. My belief system, I'm sure others feel the same way. Energetic blocks. Our energetic blocks stop the flow. When we're able to lift that veil of the pain and allow the light to come forward, it makes it much easier for those in spirit, guides, angels, loved ones to communicate with us because that natural flow is happening. But when we're going through these deep-seated griefs or periods of time where we're challenged, whatever the situation is, which is normal, it is they're always there, but we may not always hear them because we're trying to process through our own situations.
Exactly. I mean, if you do this kind of like wrapped in the shroud, like I talked about earlier, it's more difficult for them to penetrate at those times, but they're still there. They're always there. Thank you for saying that. That's so true. Yeah.
You also mentioned, too, on page 123, may I add, maintaining communication between the worlds is as important to our loved ones as it is to us. Could you just elaborate on that a little bit, please?
Maintaining communication between the worlds. Well, I think how I'm going to relate that is, all of our loved ones lived a life, right? They lived a life here, and they lived a life well lived, and most of them, right? And they want to be remembered. But more importantly than that, I believe in soul planning, and I believe that my son and I have had the plan. Not that he would come here and be murdered at the age of 23, but I believe that we had a plan, that it's possible that he would choose to leave early. And I can imagine my life between life and saying, "Well, I'm out. I'm not going to be your mom." And he's like, "Are you sure? Because you've got all these things you want to experience. You life path 11, and and so." I'm like, well, I'll do it. And then if I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. I don't know what I was thinking. I'm never doing it again. So God willing, I won't have to do it again. But I think that in honoring of the plan that we made, and I like to, it's like, so we came and we lived and we loved, and Bryan did choose to leave early, even not of his own hand, right? He didn't
Right.
die when he disappeared off his trike at the age of 3. He didn't die in the river that he should have died in. I think he picked that moment. He had things he had yet to do, and he chose that moment when it presented itself again to go. I'm not going to dishonor him and exit. I'm not going to dishonor him and not fulfill my true purpose and live up to what I came here to do, right? The things that I wanted to accomplish. So I know it's a partnership. I know he is working with kids on the other side. I know that he brings those kids in and they bring their moms or their dads in. I know that that's true. And just, I mean, and for the next teacher too, it's not always me, right? But I know that he's working with me in that way. And they're busy on the other side helping us reach our full potential and helping us step into this pathway of healing, and helping kind of right us on the path, if you will, helping us find our footing. And they're always there to pick us up. Always.
Well, let's get back to your book. If you are interested in winning a copy of Paige's book, I am going to buy the book and ship it to you personally. And you will be, the person who's going to win is going to be emailing me their address. So please type 11 into the chat. If you haven't already done so, you only need to do it once to do the giveaway. And we'll be holding that real shortly. Paige, could you talk a little bit about the work that you do today and some of the retreat and that you do to share with our listeners, please? Yes.
Thank you for asking. It's
yes.
I said it's my favorite thing a bunch of times today.
You're this easy to listen to, her book is just as easy to read. It is just like woof, 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 woof. You just read right through it. So
it's intentionally short. It's intentionally a lot of white space, so that you can pick it up, read a chapter, put it down, because I know how grief is. I couldn't read a book for years, so I get it. Just read a little bit at a time. So within the Transcending Grief Project, which Kat Bailey and I formed last summer, we joined together to do retreats for people. Now, I've been doing retreats for 4 years. I do small, in-person, intimate retreats in Idaho. This will be my 4th one. I've done 4. This will be my 5th one this year. We usually go to a mountain setting, either Stanley on the Salmon River or McCall up on Payette Lake up in McCall, Idaho, up north of me. And they're just like 8 to 11 people, and we bond and we spend time together, and we hike, and I teach channeling, and I teach, all the things. I do Reiki for them. We just spend 3.5 days of healing together. Those retreats I keep as low cost as possible. I do not make a profit on them. I'm just here to serve. That is my give back to the community. And it means everything to me. You should see the pickup truck that I load up with yoga mats and the food and all the things. And I'm just like, if you can tell, I've got a lot of energy. So it's just, I'm all in. So I love that. And this year we actually, it's sold out. So next year, watch
next year.
If
you go to your website, you can join the newsletter and you can stay updated on that, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you can sign up for notification on future retreats. And then within the Transcending Grief Project, Kat and I do retreats. They're called Transcending Grief Retreat. This year's is also sold out. It's in June in Connecticut. And it is I mean, next level transcendence. It is next level stuff, you guys. And so it sold out in 48 hours, and we're so excited. I can't wait to get there. I can't tell you anything about it because it's a secret, but I'll tell you
Okay.
later. And then next year, I'm hoping to do an Idaho retreat. Well, I will do an Idaho retreat, and then we'll have 2, maybe 3 transcending grief retreats. We're going to be in Connecticut again, June 19th through the 23rd next year. We might be in London for a UK retreat at the end of August next year.
Wow.
And then we're probably going to do a West Coast. We're still trying to figure that out. So we'll do 3 different transcending grief retreats, and I'll always do my Idaho Give Back retreat for a smaller audience. The other retreats, we have 30 to 50 people, so a little bit bigger audience, but we both love it. It's really coming from our hearts to yours. So we do that. That takes up much of my time. I also host the 2 groups, one for helping parents heal, one for transcending grief. And under transcending grief, we have what we call our Sunday chat series. Every Sunday, one of 5 of us gives a talk or a presentation. Last week, I did a 1.5-hour presentation on purpose and living in alignment with your soul. That's now on YouTube. Our YouTube channel is Transcending Grief. So thank you so much for asking about all of that.
Of course. And then the link to Paige's website is in the description field of this broadcast. And also, if you go to in the comments section, I did put a direct link to Amazon where you can also purchase her book. All right, let's do the drawing and let's see who is going to be the lucky winner of the book today. All right, Laura, let it roll.
11. Oh, how cool. I like your app.
Yeah, I do too. Hopefully my name doesn't come up. Oh, good. My name's not coming up.
Oh, good.
Oh, Carla!
Yeah, hi, Carla. I know
Carla. Okay, Carla also, Carla was a guest on here, I think it was in February, and she also has a chapter in this book, Gathering at the Doorway, curated by Camille Dan. Carla, I know how to reach you, so I will contact you to get your address so that I can get you that book. Congratulations, Carla.
Thank you for doing that.
Yes, of course. Thank you to everybody who entered into the drawing. Any last thoughts before we wrap this up here, Paige? This has been such a fascinating conversation with you today. Any final thoughts you'd like to share?
I just thank you so much, because spreading the word, I really feel like all of us, it's like we're trying to help make this concept of the afterlife more mainstream, and to make it more mainstream in the grieving community, right? So I think it's becoming more and more so. To me, it is the pathway to healing, period. I feel like if we believe in the afterlife and we embrace that, like we know that that's real, and we know that we're having this relationship with our child, our husband or our sister or our brother or whoever it is that you're grieving, then there's light, right? There's light in that, and there's a way forward. So thanks for helping to shed light on that.
Thank you, Paige. And again, Choose to Believe. Choose to Believe, A Story of Miracles, Healing, and the Afterlife by Paige W. Lee. Highly recommend this book. I read it twice. Absolutely love it. It has just been highlighted. Thank you to everybody who has joined us live. Thank you to Laura, who moderated the event for us today. I so appreciate you. And of course, a special thank you to Paige, who joined us live tonight. Paige, please stay on after the live. I'd like to chat with you. Okay. So much love and so much blessings. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Bye.